years. So in many ways, he just took the volume and cranked it up, which is what was happening in the 60s all over the place.
Kesey also happens to be in the right place at the right time, the San Francisco Bay Area. Its heart is in a district called Haight-Ashbury.
The Haight-Ashbury was a development in progress. People started to be aware of each other and to relate with each other. Artists, poets, playwrights, men, women began using marijuana, and then a little later LSD, and it started to bring us all together.
Haight-Ashbury becomes a community built around drugs, youth, music, and a generally radical way of looking at life. Young people are angry about the escalating war in Vietnam, disillusioned with the values of their parents, and longing to break free of old conventions.
We were looking for something that had more power, more passion, and more freedom in it than the 50s. The 50s were comfortable and closed. So we were trying to break through that, and LSD certainly helped.
Singer Grace Slick is at the center of the Haight-Ashbury Revolution. A member of the Jefferson Airplane rock band and author of the psychedelic anthem, White Rabbit, she remembers her first encounter with hallucinogens.
But they all do sort of the same thing, and that is rearrange what you thought was real. And they remind you of the beauty of very simple things. You forget, because you're so busy going from A to Z, that there's 24 letters in between.
Adapting the universal term of approval employed by the free spirits living in Haight-Ashbury, a San Francisco journalist dubs them hippies. Although conservative older America comes to despise them, the youth of the country embrace them.
And you'd read about it, and you knew if you really wanted to find out what was going on, you had to come to San Francisco. And the mythic words, Haight-Ashbury, you had to make a pilgrimage there.
LSD affects nearly every aspect of hippie culture, from lifestyle to music to clothing. As the capital of the psychedelic movement, Haight-Ashbury is a unique experiment in alternative lifestyles. To a large extent, LSD, Albert Hoffman's problem child, fuels the revolution.
And the thing that I think characterized San Francisco more than any other revolution was LSD. I mean, people have tried to organize before around working conditions or living conditions or social issues, but the thing that made it so unique was that there was a magic pill.
Yet not everyone is enamored with the magic pill or the culture built around it. All across the country, Americans view LSD with increasing alarm and suspicion.
It was a feeling that you could take a college graduate from Indiana U and give him LSD and create a hippie. That's what it was sort of college baby boomer plus LSD equals hippie. And hippie equals somebody who's dropping out and probably wants to overthrow the government and the culture of America.
The drug also begins to divide the mental health establishment. Although some therapists swear by it, there is no consensus about its benefits.
It wasn't the type of drug you give to cure the common cold or something. It didn't have a specific purpose that you would take it for, that you would cure a specific problem. LSD was sort of more wide open than that. In that sense, it was out of kilter with the fundamental assumptions of the Western medical establishment.
So by the mid-60s, the government declares war on LSD. With increasing frequency, hospitals admit patients who freak out during bad acid trips.
They really felt this is a thing that escaped from the lab, and it better be made illegal fast. And the door shut on it very rapidly.
On October 6th, 1966, LSD becomes illegal in California. 2 years later, the federal government introduces a law making possession a misdemeanor and sale a felony. But the government can't stop the psychedelic movement. Its very illegality makes it more alluring. Sales of black market acid soar. Rock music spreads the LSD message around the world. Songs by The Doors, The Rolling Stones, The Grateful Dead, among others, allude to the acid experience. In 1967, the Beatles produced their psychedelic masterpiece, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, with its surreal imagery of tangerine trees and marmalade skies. That same year, the psychedelic movement begins to drown in its own popularity. Haight-Ashbury is now a popular tourist attraction. It's the summer of love.
All the floodgates were open. There was newspaper reporters from all over the world, drunks, roustabouts, vagabonds, drug addicts, Hell's Angels. Everybody came to the Haight. It was an open party. A lot of hard drugs came into the Haight. The mafia came into the Haight. So everything started to go downhill.
America descends into a period of increasing social unrest. Political assassinations, the escalation of the war in Vietnam, racial unrest, and student activism turn the country into a battlefield. Society is polarized.
The use of LSD became identified with protests against the Vietnam War and efforts to radical social movements in society. And as a result, the dangers of one became conflated with the dangers or the perceived dangers of another. If you were against the war and that was seen as unpatriotic, taking LSD became unpatriotic to the minds of the members of the establishment.
With Richard Nixon's election to the presidency in 1968 came his declaration of a war on drugs. But little does this president know how close he comes to taking an acid trip himself. A tea party is planned for the alumni of Tricia Nixon's alma mater, Finch College, and one of the graduates invited is rock star Grace Slick.
And I called up Abby Hoffman, asked him if he wanted to go to a tea at the White House. And we decided probably Nixon needed about 600 micrograms of acid, which is a pretty heavy dose. And it's very small, so you can carry it in your pocket. So I could have reached into my pocket and gone right over his teacup, and he wouldn't have even noticed, and it's tasteless.
But the scheme fails when White House security recognizes her.
We never got in, not because I wasn't invited, but because they recognized Grace Slick, unfortunately, and said, "I'm sorry, you can't come in." And I said, "Well, but I have an invitation." And they said, "Well, you can't come in because I'm on the FBI list." I guess because of some of my lyrics, I don't know.
By the end of the 60s, the acid culture is losing steam. Press reports of LSD suicides are increasingly in the news, and acid is linked to the Manson family's horrific Tate LaBianca murders.
LSD began to be demonized in almost all of the media. You did not read a positive story about this. Most people don't know that it even had this extraordinary scientific career.
When we continue, the government cracks down on LSD and Timothy Leary.
The judge declared him the most dangerous man in the world.
In the 1960s, LSD tablets might be decorated with the Batman logo or Superman's insignia. In the 1990s, the most popular design chosen by manufacturers of illicit LSD is Bart Simpson's head. History's Mysteries will be right back here on the History Channel.
By the late 60s, LSD becomes public drug enemy #1. Anyone associated with the drug culture is targeted. In 1970, Timothy Leary is arrested for possession of marijuana and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Also in 1970, a newly created federal agency, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, puts LSD in its Schedule 1 category, a classification reserved for addictive drugs of no redeeming value. Although illegal, LSD has a very active underground life. There is still a great demand for it, and it's not hard to get. It is a staple at youth parties known as raves. The irony is that LSD can be obtained illegally without much difficulty, but legitimate researchers have virtually no access to the drug.
What really ended at the end of the 60s was the scientific use of LSD. And a lot of researchers feel a little bit like Galileo, that they had the first telescope that could look at what consciousness was, how the psyche was formed, how bodily energies get transformed into what we call consciousness. And they lost that telescope, not for any scientific reasons, but wholly for cultural reasons. And they would like to see it restored.
If the government does sanction LSD research again, where will it lead?
There was so much potential. We should go back and look at what other kinds of medical applications there have, what other kinds of applications for therapy, what other kinds of insights might be shed on how the mind works.
Yet the unpredictability of the drug is still a major problem.
It is a very strong drug. On the one hand, you hear me explaining it as being this exquisite revelation. And on the other hand, I'm saying look out because you might jump out a window. That's the problem, is you never know.
Absolutely, there are people in mental institutions that you can say that the spring that put them there, the little vehicle they rode into that appalling state was LSD.
As for the CIA, the agency has expressed regret for its drug experiments with human subjects. But intelligence officials have yet to make public details relating to the mysterious death of Army biological research scientist Dr. Frank Olson.
After the Watergate scandal, there was kind of